Cheryl Erickson, and I'm the Indigenous focused ECE instructor with Louis Riel Vocational College. Today in Developing ECE Curriculum, we're going to take a look at Chapter 1, which is the Introduction to Programming in the Early Years. But before we get started, I just want to remind you to read Chapter 1 of your textbook, as this video is not a replacement for your chapter readings. One of the biggest factors in program planning for young children is looking at it being somewhat of a journey. So there's a little metaphor here at the start of your textbook that describes the journey to program planning. And one of the biggest issues is that it's always evolving and it's always different as you look at the different dynamics of children and what their development is. So this metaphor describes the journey as traveling across a changing landscape of uneven territories. Some of the parts of the journey have defined destinations with a map, and others may be spontaneous and discovered without a plan. And typically our programming is planned. There's parts of it that we develop a plan in a way that we want to implement an activity with the children, but there is going to be a lot of spontaneous, and it could change into different directions and evolve into different dynamics. So that's something to be really prepared for. Your journey should be both pleasurable and it should be difficult. It's always hard to pre-plan an activity because you never know if children are going to be interested in it or not. The pleasure that comes out of these activities is, even if it does change and move into a different direction of something that you've planned, that is good, that is okay. And because it should be about what the children are interested in and what the children should be learning. So whenever you enter your journey, it's also really important to reflect back upon your plan and how that activity was implemented. And how, next time if you're implementing that, what changes could be made. So again, it is a journey. It's your goals almost as an ECE will change and evolve over time. We're always looking at how best to meet the needs of the children. So that should be your focus and that should be the goals. And we always want to plan activities that are interesting to children, things that are based on what they're interested in. So your activities should come from the child and we can co-construct that learning together. So it should be a very enjoyable and pleasurable activity for both you as well as the children. We also look in Chapter 1 of Developing ECE Curriculum at the term professionalism and your professional role. So as ECEs, we're always going to look at how best to take on that role of professionalism. And one of the first documents that we create as ECEs is our personal philosophies. And that is a really important tool that gauges us in our professional development. So we want to look at what our images of ourselves and what our images of the children and what we want in our program or in our development of children in their learning process. So we want to have a lot of knowledge about children. We want to define what the learning should involve in terms of the 4 different developmental domains, how we're gauging that practice within the children. So it's always going to change as well. So your personal philosophy that you're going to develop as a student is going to evolve over time. And that's because you're going to gain different insight, different knowledge, as you spend time in an early learning environment with children. And so that knowledge is going to change because of the conversations we're going to have with children, the learning that takes place as we interact with our coworkers, as we interact with families, and other professionals that may come into the center to work with children and to work with us. So we will evolve, and it is a continuous learning and practice with a lot of improvements that are going to take place over your duration of time working with young children. Some of the key attributes in becoming an effective early learning professional is really important to wonder, think, and explore along with the children. And that could be in your discussions and the questions that you're going to ask children as you're implementing different activities with them, or just involved in conversations regarding things that are interesting to the children. So again, reflection is a really important process in early learning. We always want to reflect back on maybe the discussions we're having with the children as well, and how that could be utilized more effectively in our approaches to program planning in the future. So it is a very reflective process. Not only are you pre-planning activities for children, there's a lot of spontaneous learning that takes place in those activities, and those spontaneous learning or conversations and outcomes that come from just your daily interactions or the activities that you're implementing can be a big part of your reflection and the questions that you might ask for future activities or future program planning. So I hope that makes sense. We always want to be able to clearly communicate our beliefs and values, and it's really important that we develop what our values are. And our values is going to be based on a lot of knowledge of early childhood development, where children should be, those developmentally appropriate practices that we're going to put into place as far as what our program planning is. And our program planning is not just the activities that we're implementing with the children, but what our daily curriculum is. So how maybe you define that daily schedule, the uninterrupted free play, where we are as ECEs in that free play with the children, what is our role, what are our responsibilities with the children in that free play to promote learning and growth, as well as the critical thinking, which is really an important part of early childhood cognitive development. We want children to develop those critical thinking instincts as well. We are essentially preparing children for the jobs of the future when you think about early childhood education and how that critical thinking comes into place. So we are really preparing them for future roles. So we want to, really ensure that our professional practices involve a lot of the critical thinking processes and really gauging children in logical thinking, just to best prepare them for the next phase of their educational process. So when we look at early learning profession, it is seen as a profession in progress, because it's always evolving and it's always changing. And again, just going back to our personal philosophy, I think I've probably gone back to look at my personal philosophy probably a dozen times within my career as an early childhood professional, and that has changed as well because I've taken on different roles as well. So I've worked as a frontline ECE, I've worked as an inclusion, involved in inclusion planning with children as well. So your thinking and your philosophy does change when you take on different roles as well. And then going on the management side as well, you think about the overall program development and how it best meets the needs of the children. So it is ongoing. As an ECE professional, you're going to always want to further your education, whether it's workshops or courses in early childhood education. Anything that you bring in as far as education process is going to benefit the children, it's going to benefit your coworkers. And so there's always a lot of changes within our profession as well. And so you're going to want to be up to date regarding anything that's happening currently in the ECE field, because again, that best meets the needs of the children. As a ECE, we want to look at professional standards and following guidelines and things such as the Manitoba Early Learning and Childcare Regulations is a professional practice and standard. So you want to make sure that you are following all those standards and guidelines, because that does show that you are professional and that you are providing quality care for young children. A code of ethics is really important. So what are ethics? Manitoba Early Learning and Childcare does provide, I believe it's 5 different workshops that are under the umbrella of ethics. And those are really important workshops to take as an ECE. You want to define ethics and carry on those ethical practices. Putting children first within that environment is a really important daily practice as an ECE. So training is really important as far as, especially the special needs side of it. There's always a lot of different information coming to us about how to best care for children. So you want to make sure that all your training is up to date in terms of first aid, CPR, EpiPen, special medications for children. Those are all very important to professionalism, and again, ethics as well. And a lot of this is going to be not only responsibility of the center, but you as ECE professional, making sure that you can best care for the children. So you're going to want to implement that autonomous type of practice within your center. You don't ever want to be put in a situation where you don't know something that's specific to a child that you're working with. You want to make sure that you know everything that there is about that particular child that's coming into your care. So that's talking with the parents, that's reading the child's personal file, meeting with specialists. All that is really important, because that allows you to best to care for that child in the best possible way. They're very important professional practice. So when we talk about professional practice, again, there is no magic formula. It is a process of learning and growing, and finding out as much information as you can. So a lot of us as ECEs search out or seek out professional development opportunities, because that does help us to offer higher quality care to children, and it does help us to best care for the children in our environment. So to consider yourself a professional is in this slide, it talks about being an ethical actor in relationships with others. So in your professional practice at the beginning, you want to seek out as much knowledge and information as possible. You want to best understand what it means to be ethical, to consider yourself as an independent individual, but you're also going to work with a team of individuals as well that's going to share their knowledge and information with you. So what does it mean to be ethical? I always say putting the children first, their needs over anybody else's needs, families' needs first. And what is going to be your practice in doing that? So what types of daily programming is going to be involved in meeting the needs of the children? And that would be developmentally appropriate. So you're going to look at children not only as where they are in their chronological age, but where they are developmentally. So all children do grow and learn at different paces. As a professional ECE, you should be providing daily curriculum to each child at their developmental needs. So that's a big part of the process of being an ECE and being a professional, as well as surrounding yourself with knowledgeable individuals as well. And a critical friend is really important in your journey as a professional as well. And so a critical friend is somebody who is like-minded, has the same goals and values as you, and can also help you along your journey. It could be somebody that you could utilize as a sounding board, can bounce ideas off of, can ask questions regarding programming and children. It's also somebody that you're working with that shares in that confidentiality type of agreement as well. So they can help you in your journey explore different ideas, different practices, different opinions, and help you, learn, grow, and construct your knowledge with the children. So it's somebody that, in your journey is really going to help you to grow professionally. And within that continuum, it's going to, again, best meet the needs of the children you're caring for. Collaborative learning practices and professional disclosure. It's going to be a lot about the discussions that you're going to have again with the children, with their families, with your colleagues as well. And so those discussions really help you learn a lot about the children, family practices, what is best, I guess, for not only the children, but your program, and what types of curriculum you're going to offer your families. So you're going to start with, maybe sitting down with your coworkers and defining what your daily schedule, what your curriculum is going to be, and then adapting that to the developmental capabilities of the children and also the interests of the children. So it's really talking, learning about ideas, feelings, and how we're going to build upon that in our social environment within the daycare center. We also want to look at really implementing that family side of children into the environment, because that makes children really more comfortable in the environment. So how can you adapt your environment to really be more family-centered and more child-centered is going to be really important. And it's interesting to find that balance between family-centered and child-centered. So there's a lot of different types of models and approaches that we use as early childhood educators, to the Reggio Emilio approach, to the Emergent Curriculum approach that we're going to look at a little bit more. We follow the early learning and childcare framework, curriculum framework. So it kind of, when we look at developing our center routines, policy, and curriculum, it all comes from Manitoba Early Learning and Childcare's curriculum framework, and how we adapt that to our own unique center framework. And so that, again, is taking information from discussions from coworkers, families, our supervisors, our directors, and making our own unique curriculum for our children. And again, it's going to always be evolving, again, because you're always going to have different dynamics, different types of family styles that come into play. And so that is going to change the delivery of your curriculum and your programming. So for example, if all of a sudden in your environment you have a lot of different children from different, say, newcomers from different cultures that are immigrating into Canada and have started in your center, your approach to teaching these children is going to change. It's going to be different from what you've done in the past with just, children that were born and raised in the city of Winnipeg. Yes, they do have different cultural backgrounds, but they're more adapted per se than new children from different countries. So you're going to have language barriers. So that will be a challenge in how you teach children when you have language barriers, and how you're going to how your teaching will evolve. It's going to be different. You're going to use maybe more pictures. You're going to use learn a little bit about language. So you want to adapt that into your environment, and you're also looking at adding cultural aspects from these new families into your environment to make that more comfortable. So it could be colors, it could be things on your menu, it could be books, it could be music. So when I say professional practice and I talk about curriculum, you look at how many different things that I just mentioned that's involved in our daily practices with the children. So it's not just simply sitting down and saying, I'm going to plan an art activity, and my goal of this art activity is to teach children colors. My art activity is going to be different when I'm looking at children that maybe don't speak English. How I'm going to adapt that to meet the needs of those children is going to be a little bit different. So it really is challenging, it really is evolving, and it's always going to be different depending on the ages of the children. So when I say planning an art activity for 5-year-old children is going to be very different from planning an art activity for 2-year-old children. So again, professional skills and competencies are always going to be a huge part of ECE curriculum, and how you are implementing these activities is going to involve a lot of big ideas and a lot of big thoughts as well. So we always want to look at the dynamics of our children, our program, the diversity. We want to listen to the voices of the children. We want to collaborate with our coworkers, with the parents, connect with the families, and offer children the best that we can within our programming. And so when I say that, looking again at cultural relevance is a huge issue in making children comfortable. And so if I was to be enrolling many children into the environment from different types of cultural backgrounds, I would really want to have a lot of knowledge about where these children are coming from, where they are in their learning process, and how can I go about finding out that information. And that's going to be collaborating with families. It might be collaborating with interpreters to open up that discussion with families and find out as much information and structure my environment based on those conversations, as well as conversations with the children in that program planning. Knowledge of big ideas is a really big part of understanding and expanding children's knowledge. So all our program planning really comes from things that children are interested in, and it is always changing quickly. So we move from something like bugs to construction because of things that are going on in the environment around us. And I use the terms the bugs and the construction just because it is summertime. We see a lot of bugs outside, and often that's a lot of conversation that's happening with the children. And then in the environment, there's many different things happening as well. So you can see a tractor pull up and construction start to take place in front of your building. So then again, your curriculum or your planning is going to change, because now the children are going to get excited about something that's happening in the world around them. And we want to give them as much information and knowledge about that as we can. So we're going to bring out construction toys for them. We're going to bring out pictures and books and try to plan different types of activities to teach children more information about those topics. But again, they could also be interested in something like Disney and movies and princesses, and that's exciting for them too. However, we're really going to want to focus more on the information or the practices that we can really promote critical thinking in. And so we'll really want to encourage more of the knowledge around the construction or the bugs than we are the princesses and things like that, because more information and more critical thinking will come out of those topics than they will maybe cartoons and things like that. So it is always evolving. There is a lot of different things that are going on within your environment, and you want to promote that. So not to say that cartoons and things like that aren't exciting, but they do have their time and their place. We really do want to promote learning, growing, and developing. So that's why we will choose to really focus on those opportunities for critical thinking, opposed to cartoons and things like that. The evolution of critical framework, we've talked about that in terms of us as ECEs here in Manitoba. We follow the framework, early learning framework that Manitoba Early Learning and Childcare Program has provided for us. As far as Canada, each province does have an early learning framework as well, and that is used to best plan curriculum for young children. We want to be responsible professionals and make sure we're adhering to that framework in terms of how, again, we implement what our practices are, what our daily program is to offer children, how we implement uninterrupted free play, how we plan to develop growth and learning in young children in all the developmental domains. As far as how nutrition comes into play as well. And so we're planning nutritious snacks for children, because that does fuel the body. It does help them focus. It's good for cognitive development as well. So those are some of the major advantages of curriculum framework. They support, they guide us as learning early professionals, making specialized decisions regarding children who need a little bit more in terms of inclusive special needs care. We want to provide curiosity. We want to provide interesting things for children. So we do ultimately need to be able to articulate that curriculum framework. It helps to define our practices, our daily professional practices as ECEs, and how we go about doing that. And it all stems from our policies, our procedures, and our daily schedules in our centers. There are different models and approaches to curriculum framework. So here in Manitoba, we have a curriculum framework. It exists. It's a national plan. It helps us as early learning professionals think about the tools that we're going to use, the materials, the supplies. Even within that, in Manitoba Early Learning does provide us with a list of toys and materials that we should have available for the children every day. And those, again, really focus on developmentally appropriate practices, so they're geared for the different ages of the children. They're geared to help the children learn, grow, and develop in all the different developmental domains. So we're talking about cognitive, we're talking about language, we're talking about physical, social, and emotional development, as well as our daily interactions with the children. So they're really good tools to set the children up for success in their daily learning. as well as going back to us as ECE professionals. We do have the toys, the materials available for the children, but how do we in our daily practices get involved with the children as they're playing and interacting to further question them and interact with them, to develop those, again, critical thinking skills that are so important in setting them up for success in their future learning. So we really, we do have a great framework structure. It is a structure, and we need to ensure that we are meeting our roles as ECEs within that framework structure. We also have approaches in our framework regarding our curriculum and how that is to be implemented, what our curriculum design is. So we know that children learn best through play is the model for our model for ECE curriculum. And so we best set up our classroom giving children the advantages and many opportunities to learn through play. And so we structure our environment to encompass 7 different curriculum areas. And within those curriculum areas, we have a wide variety of toys and materials, again, to foster learning and growing and developing. We also implement Emergent Curriculum. And so within that Emergent Curriculum, we're looking at planning and implementing activities that are coming from the thoughts of the children or the interest of the children. And so that is a really important practice as well. Emergent curriculum is always evolving, it is always changing. We sit down with the children in our daily interactions, in our daily, in the daily environment, and we listen to the children, and we co-construct the learning with them. So they may have ideas and they may have questions, or they may have thoughts about certain subjects or ideas and things that they're interested in. And what kinds of questions do we ask the children to really get them thinking is really important. And what types of materials do we offer them to expand their knowledge and their thinking. And so that really goes back to earlier when I said how quickly their thinking changes and how quickly this process does evolve. And so simply something from bugs to construction is based on Emergent Curriculum, because those types of ideas and interests are coming from the children, and how we go about expanding that is going to be key. So that is the end of our discussion on the early years and planning. Please do see your instructor if you have any questions regarding that, or if you've just check in to make sure that you haven't missed any handouts or assignments pertaining to Chapter 1 of Developing ECE Curriculum.